Copy, comrade. Bolt 1.
Nicole, this might be easier out of the APFR.
Okay, Joe, we recommend maybe trying just 1 foot out, and if that doesn't work, then you have a go to egress the APFR. And just a reminder to ret to the installed lens cover handle before you remove it.
I'll do that. Quick reminder. Got a red on it with a good jiggle.
Copy.
I'm going to go ahead and remove the lens cover. I'm going to unlock.
And you got that right, Joe. It's you unlock the latch lever so that it's perpendicular to the plane of the lens, and then you'll have to push the cover towards the latch and tilt it away from the lens to get it off.
Joe Acaba is in the process of removing a lens cover from the degraded camera light assembly that was unbolted from the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm a short time ago and replaced with a spare. That lens cover will be installed on the spare camera light assembly here a short time from now.
Send the cord, got the lens cover on. Should be good. Pull and shake test.
Okay, comrade, I copied the anti-backlash neutral. Did you also get the verifier on the bolt?
You want affirmative. Did you copy, Nicole?
Hey, from Joe, I copied that you have the lens on the spare CLA with a good pull test. Okay, Joe, next step is to stow the degraded CLA in your bag, and then you can hop out of the APFR.
We're good on all 4 volts, easy one.
Thanks, Comrade. Can you confirm that you had 5 turns on the PGT for each of those bolts? Great. Thank you, sir. And then we can move on to the 2-inch socket onto your PGT.
You want?
This is Mission Control Houston as we approach the 4-hour mark into today's spacewalk. You're looking at Joe Acaba through the eyes of a new external high-definition camera installed on the S1 truss of the station a short time ago by Acaba. He has just replaced a degraded camera assembly on the end effector of the Canadarm2 robotic arm in preparation for it being used with sharp acuity for the grapple and berthing of the orbital ATK Cygnus cargo craft scheduled to be launched in a few weeks from the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. Randy Bresnik, meanwhile, is over on the port truss of the station at an external logistics carrier spare parts platform as he is retorquing a series of bolts on one of 2 spare pump module components, basically preparing these 2 components, one on external logistics carrier 1 on the port truss of the station, before he moves on to similar work on external stowage platform number 2, ESP2, outside of the Quest airlock. The preparation of these 2 spare pump modules will allow them easier access in case they need to be used for any replacement work in the future.
Hey guys, from inside the digital newsroom at Fox 5 DC, you're watching this NASA spacewalk right now. It is live, coming over the sources via NASA, and it's actually pretty interesting. There's a little break in the sound, so I wanted to come back into the newsroom and just tell you a little more about it. I'm here with Risa,
hi guys,
our social media editor, so we're just going to chat a little social today. So first of all, thanks for joining us on the stream today. We got started a little later than usual. Just kind of getting stuff prepared, not a ton of live breaking sources coming into us, but we're gonna have some really interesting video coverage of some stuff that happened earlier this morning. But this right here, these are 2 astronauts that you're looking at.
That's
really
cool.
It's really neat. Randy Bresnik and Joe Acaba on the spacewalk, and they're working on upgrading the orbiting laboratory for NASA. And actually, I came across this really interesting website. Did you guys know you can go to howmanypeopleareinspacerighttnow.com?
What?
And it's just this
so
big
cool.
number that pops up on your screen. You're able to see who is actually in space, whether it be American astronauts or international. Right now there's 6 total.
Okay. How many from the, so 2 from the US and then where in the
Yeah, there's a
one?
couple there's a couple from Russia,
Okay.
a few from the US, and I think 1 Italian,
that's
Paolo.
pretty awesome.
Something I've been following it a lot because sometimes we get this source in from NASA. So kind of cool. It reminds me of those websites that you can just type in that domain and it's sort of like a yes or no question, or it's like who won this game, or like some joking kind of like digital thing.
That's pretty awesome. I wonder who launched this.
I know. I don't know.
The
T actually told me about it, which is
Oh,
funny.
our IT guy. Of course he'd know.
But we just want to check in with you guys, and thank you for watching, obviously, and let us know who's on today. You can use the live chat to chat with us. Let us know where you're watching from and what you want to see. We'll bring you back this picture. This is kind of a look inside, I believe, Johnson Space Center in Houston, because they do all their communications from there and they go out. But we get this in from time to time. So it's not the most lively, loud stuff, but we want to kind of chit-chat over it and just kind of see what's going on, what's popping for today. So we came in today. It's Friday, and Risa, you've been working on some social stuff?
Friday
I know.
Eve. You know,
Exciting.
Friday hits, work, kind of like, oh.
Depending on your schedule, because the news is all the time.
Oh gosh,
And we have a lot of people that are on different sides, I guess, tonight and weekends. But we've been covering some interesting stories on social, right? We had some stuff popping overnight.
We had a very interesting one. A little bit of a rundown on him. Caden has been battling like a heart condition since he was 8 months, bless his heart. Doctors gave him 5 to 10 years to live. Well, guess what? They also said 5 years is the max that we're probably going to give you. 10 is being too generous. He's about to turn 5 next week. And his family is asking for people to send him birthday wishes. They hope to get a letter from every state. So if you guys head to our Instagram account, you'll see the picture on there with the address if you want to send them a birthday letter, because I plan to do that once I get home. And just send them your well wishes, you know, congratulate this super kid who proved everybody wrong. And so these are the kind of stories that I work on. And, you know, we've chatted this past week. I'm like, what do I do? So there you go, guys. There's a story that we highlighted on. It's on our Instagram. You can find it on our Facebook. So head to fox5dc.com just to get a little bit more info on it.
What kind of comments were on that one? Were people
oh my gosh,
talking
we
it
got
out?
flooded with happy birthday, Caden, hashtag super kid.
Aww.
So sweet, feel good stories that people definitely want to look into to kind of break away sometimes from, you know, the more hard-hitting news. So
which we do cover in the stories a lot.
Absolutely, we do that.
You try to do the human interest ones on Instagram a little more.
For sure, because, you know, it's Instagram,
balance it out.
A little bit more balance. Exactly.
Also, we're going to be trying to do this a little more digital coverage of really interesting community events and feature type events that are happening in DC, because we're both sort of tuned in big time to the DMV area and just everything from food and the arts and the community, and we're going to try to sort of pioneer and launch a new thing where we're covering more of that for you guys. Like I said, both on our web stories and our social, because all of social is sort of at our fingertips now. We use that to go to stuff, to see what's happening. So we're going to actually go to a few really cool poppin' events in town and cover it.
We're going to bring you this cool live coverage from, like Molly said, you know, interesting events, kind of the artsy, hospitality, restaurant-y kind of industry. And we hope you guys enjoy it. I mean, that'll give our local watchers an inside guide of what to do this weekend, if not what to do this weeknight, rather than just typing it on Google, what's going on in DC, which I find myself doing constantly. I'm like, what to do this weekend in DC. So hopefully this will give you guys a better insight and, you know, can serve as a guide on like cool things happening.
Yeah, definitely. And as a local channel here and also digital people, we want to make sure we bring that out to our digital audience. So really excited to kind of work on that a little more. And if you are on with us, or maybe you're new to the stream, welcome to the show. We're going to be streaming mostly live events. We try to take anything that's breaking in live. And then also coming up, I think after we kind of chat, I'm going to go over to an event that happened just like a few hours ago, less than an hour really, and a Army Medal of Honor recipient. His name is Gary Mike Rose is what he goes by. He fought in Vietnam. He'll be receiving an actual medal from President Trump in a few days. But today there was sort of a roundtable discussion at the Pentagon for him. And I want to make sure we show that video because it's pretty interesting stuff. And
no, for sure.
There's some interesting stats behind him and what he did and how he served. And we're going to show that video out. But again, he'll be receiving it at a White House ceremony on October 23rd. And he's the 69th living soldier to receive it from actions in Vietnam. So kind of a cool thing.
Nice little feel-good story.
Might even be a cool Insta post, maybe, when he gets the
sure.
medal on in 3 days, or whenever that is. I guess next week.
Monday.
Yeah, I guess it is, because we're going into the weekend. Oh my gosh.
Guys, can you believe it? The year's almost over.
Oh my gosh, the end of October.
Oh my god.
Halloween first.
Halloween is coming. Are you doing anything special for Halloween?
You know,
what's going on?
the first thing that comes to mind is that we have an awesome Good Day show for you guys on our AM. It's always a big surprise, and there's costumes involved. So if you tune into us in the morning, the whole 10 a.m. is going to be a big surprise. They're going to be in costumes, our talent, and it'll be fun. But for my personal self, I don't really know yet. I haven't really thought of it.
I don't know either, outside of maybe going to one of my girlfriend's house and carving pumpkins. She is a mommy now, so she's like, what can I do for fun? She's always with her 8-month-old. His name is Sebastian. And I was like, what can we do? Because sometimes I feel like I'm on grandma mode too. I'm like, what can I do? I don't know what to do. So we decided on pumpkins and a little glass of champagne, so make it a little bit more adulty, kind of, you know,
I like it.
Pumpkin carving festivities. So I think that's what I'll be doing.
I like it. All right, guys. So again, just mentioning that it's Friday. It's a little bit slow right now for our sources and for our live news. So we're kind of just queuing up some video for you. Anything else popping on social that you're going to be covering today, or that you want to?
As of right now, just kind of keeping it a litof breezy. Maybe looking for some Halloween freebies and deals in the district. So probably working up a little list on that to kind of help you guys out. Some frighteningly good deals.
Nice. Really good. So, okay, so just to remind you, you can follow us on social, guys. Fox5DC on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. And our website, fox5dc.com for our stories. I think I'm going to flash it over to that video from the Pentagon this morning.
Awesome.
Because that is pretty relevant, and it just happened an hour and a half ago or so. So you can check into this recipient who's going to be receiving the Medal of Honor, like I said, on Monday at a White House ceremony. We'll probably have that live for you guys. Just queuing it up now, so let's jump over to that video and let Raisa get back to work, I guess.
All right, bye.
All right, bye guys.
We're good.
Today, we are honored by the presence of retired U.S. Army Captain Gary Michael Mike Rose, who is joined by retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Eugene McCarlin. They will discuss the events surrounding Captain Rose's military acts of heroism while serving as a combat medic with the 5th Special Forces Group Airborne from September 11th through the 14th in 1970. While his unit was engaged with a numerically superior force deep in enemy-controlled territory, Captain Rose exposed himself to enemy fire numerous times to provide medical aid to his comrades, using his own body to shield a wounded American from harm. On the final day of the mission, although severely wounded himself, Captain Rose volunteered to board the last extraction helicopter. Shortly after liftoff, the helicopter was hit by enemy anti-aircraft. Captain Rose rendered life-saving medical treatment to save a wounded Marine before the helicopter crashed. Ignoring his own injuries, Captain Rose pulled the people from the burning helicopter and provided medical aid until help arrived. Captain Rose is credited with treating more than 60 wounded personnel and saving many lives. For his conspicuous gallantry, the President will present the Medal of Honor to Captain Rose in a White House ceremony on Monday, October 23rd, and then he will be inducted into the Pentagon Hall of Heroes on October 24th. Captain Rose's name will be added to the distinguished roster in the Defense Department's Hall of Heroes, the permanent display of record for all recipients of the Medal of Honor. Now, Captain Rose will provide an opening statement, followed by brief introductions and statement from Lieutenant Colonel McCarlin.
Well, thank you all for coming this morning. I would like to start off by saying that coupled with the Presidential Unit Citation that MACSOG received about 15 years ago, and this medal, which I consider a collective medal for all of us that fought both on the ground in the Air Force and the Marines on Operation Tailwind. In a greater sense, it also honors the men of 5th Special Forces that fought during that time frame, and MACSOG as a whole during the time frame that that unit was in active duty. And in a greater sense, I think it points to the valor and the courage of the men and women who served during Vietnam, and they served with honor and pride. And they also, the ones that I know personally, all returned home and continued on to serve this country in various capacities, such as the ministry, religious ministries, police officers, nurses, doctors, so on. And I consider it a privilege to be counted amongst them. Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you for coming this morning. It's indeed a great pleasure to sit here next to Mike. I can't think of an individual more deserving of this award, but it's also a pleasure for me to have served with Mike and the other 15 guys with me on Operation Tailwind. I'm proud of them, and because of my association with them, I feel like I'm a much better man and a citizen today. I'm proud of our service. I'm proud of what we did, and we did it for the love of our country and for patriotism. And again, thank you for being here, and I'll try to answer your questions to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll now open it up for questions. Megan?
Hi, Mike. I'm Megan Myers from Army Times. Nice to talk to you again. So since between the time that the story went public, over a decade ago, and the time that it happened, how many times would you say that you had told that story to anybody? Was that something that you ever talked about?
0.
And never with anybody that you kept up with in those years, or?
Ma'am, when we left MACSOG, which was a top secret organization, basically the unit did not exist, and it was not acknowledged for almost 30 years. So when you left MACSOG, you signed all these paperwork that, you know, you read this thing, they put it in front of you, some intel officer, and, you know, it says that under penalty of 500 years in prison and $40 million fine and so on and so forth, they're going to bury you under 40 feet of concrete if you even divulge anything. So I just determined, well, if anybody asked me, I was going to be a mail clerk during the Vietnam War, so keep myself out of trouble. But the other thing is the mentality of the way people in the 5th or Special Forces are is you do a mission like that, the next day you get debriefed, you have the afternoon off, you get up the next morning, and I went back to working in the dispensary like business as usual. Anything to add to that, Colonel?
I think Mike pretty well summed it up. After the operation and I came home, I forgot about it, and nothing really surfaced until about 1998, and it became more and more in the news and popular. But as far as discussing it, even among the individuals, and I've remained real close with the guys that served with me in Tailwind, and we never really discussed it other than just laugh about some of the things that happened.
My follow-up is for you. What made you want to get involved and take on this upgrade for him? This medal upgrade.
Well, I had the honor to serve with about 5 or 6 of the other Medal of Honor recipients in Special Forces. Mike is going to be the 19th. I've been fortunate enough to know and be friends with about 10 of them, and like I say, I actually served with 5 or 6 of them. They even went on operations with me, and the actions that Mike performed on Operation Tailwind, you just can't imagine it. You can't put it into words. You can't describe it, but I can't think of anyone any more deserving than Mike to receive this award. And it's an effort that we pushed and we fought for many, many years, and finally it looks like it's coming to pass.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Susan. After living in such secrecy for so long, how does it feel to have it be so public?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think the Colonel will agree. In some respects, I wish it was still secret. I'm not used to the notoriety. My thing is, after I retired from working, is I'm involved in with a lot of great people, and most of them, I might say, are veterans, both men and women. And I'm involved with the St. Vincent de Paul Society, Purple Heart, and the Knights of Columbus, and we have an attitude that we can't fix the nation, we can't fix the state, we can't even fix our city, but we can fix our neighborhood, our community. And so we can actually go out and do something that day, and at the end of the day, we can actually see something physically that we've accomplished that just a little bit made that portion of our city a little better. Yes, ma'am.
So you're used to being that quiet warrior who works in the background, and that's sort of how it was in 1970 when this happened. You married your wife the next year. Was she someone you knew when this happened?
No,
tell
ma'am.
us about your life at that juncture.
Well, I can tell you how I met my wife, if you're that interested. I got back on a Saturday, and about Sunday, my mother started on my case about calling this young lady, a friend of hers. It was a friend of my mother's who lived upstairs from ours, and her best friend had a sister. So about Wednesday, just to get my mother off my back, if you would, and I don't know if your mother's and you have an adult child, mothers never seem to think of you in terms of not being your mother, and so they know best. I guess mother knows best. But so I called her, And I talked to her. I thought, okay, 10 minutes, I'm out of here. Well, the conversation lasted about an hour. I asked her on a date, and 89 days later, we were married, and we've been married for going on 47 years. And I might add that Margaret Mary Kotzman Rose is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about, Claudio Stars and Stripes, can you talk about the emotions that you're feeling ahead of this ceremony on Monday? What's going through your mind?
Well, actually, what I'm kind of, there, two things, I guess. One, man, it's not every day a person gets to meet the President of the United States. I mean, that in itself is, to be in the same room with that person is just an incredible honor and privilege. But the other thing, too, is I get to see people that I don't get to see very often, and in some cases we haven't seen in decades. I've stayed in communication with them, but because of the distances between where we live in the country, it's very difficult. So, and they're all coming here by Sunday, and my wife and I are going to have the privilege of being able to see these friends that date back some 40, 50 years. So that's the two great things about it.
A follow-up, what's been the reaction among your family and friends as you're getting reunited with these folks?
My wife's excited about, Margaret is very excited about seeing some of the friends we haven't seen in a while. For my children, I get the idea that they're kind of pretty proud of their dad. My grandson, he's just so excited about being able to meet Mr. Trump.
You describe in your account of what happened, the gunner who had the injury that should have been mortal to his throat. Is he someone who you will be reconnecting with this week?
The Army traced him down, and unfortunately, the gentleman passed away in 2012. But the thing I take great pride in is the fact that if you had seen him on that day, you would have not thought that he would have made it. I mean, the whole front of his neck was just, he was a bloody mess, and he was in bad shape, really bad shape. And the fact that he lived all the way to 2012, that just gives me really a great sense of accomplishment, that I give credit to the people that trained me, that I was able to do something to, in spite of his injuries, to keep him so he could go home.
I'd like to add something to that. Mike saved this guy's life. The man should have died in that helicopter. But I had the opportunity, and I think it was in 1973 or 1974, a few years after Mike worked on him, and I had the opportunity to meet him at a Marine base with some of his other friends who participated in the operation with us, and had a couple of drinks with him. And the only visible signs, or the only signs that you could tell he had ever been shot, he had 2 scars under each earlobe about the size of $50. It had not affected any movement or anything in his neck, any speech or anything. It was as if it had never happened. It was more like a tattoo than a scar, but he had very distinctive scars, about like I say, about $50. So Mike did a miraculous job. I don't know how any licensed doctor could have done any more or done a better job than Mike did.
Hi, Louis Martinez with ABC News. You spoke about your training as a medic. Can you describe how it was that you chose that career path, or was it chosen for you? And knowing that this was a major conflict area, did you have any concerns when you went into this field, knowing that because you're going to be treating a lot of wounded, that you might be exposing yourself to a lot of fire in some certain cases?
Well, what happens is that during that time frame, they had special forces recruiters at most training bases, and I don't know if you take these tests at the beginning, and so these recruiters would get a hold of your scores and they'd go through them, and you get called out of a formation and you get talked to about this or that or whatever. And I got sent down with about 3 other guys from my AIT infantry at Fort Gordon. Talked to this guy, somebody, I didn't know. A guy walks in with a Green Beret. I didn't know nothing about Green Berets or Special Forces. And he talked to us and he says, we're going to have you guys take a test to see if you're qualified to go on to further training. And you have to understand, back in those days, when you were a private in the Army, you never saw NCOs or officers unless something really bad or really good happened. A Spec 4 was God. If he told you to jump on the way up, you asked how high. So this is I believe he was a master sergeant. So if a master sergeant tells you you're going to take a test, you're going to take a test. And you better do the best how you can. So I took the test, and when I got toward the end of AIT infantry, I had orders for jump school in Fort Bragg to go to Special Forces training. I get to Fort Bragg, you take another battery test, and they said, well, we think you'd be best suited to be a medic. And you say, okay, so you do it. This is the 60s, you know. So as far as the intrepidation about going into combat, or that, which I guess you alluded to, that probably never entered my head. And I suspect that for most of us, even if you were trained for infantry or whatever, it probably doesn't enter your head until that point in time frame where you actually have to step up into a helicopter and you're going into a hot landing zone. That's probably the first time in your life that you, oh, this might be serious. Or there could be some catastrophic consequences. I don't, any other feelings on that?
Pretty well covered.
Given that you had such a long experience there, how would you rate this incident actually with others that you've had? I mean, were there others of similar intensity that are not being recognized, of course? But I mean, are there others in situations that?
Well, I had been on operations before and after, but that one I knew something was up because the First Sergeant Adair came by and said, make sure you pack extra this and that, and you watch the guys with you, even though you don't know what's really going on, because you're only told what you need to know to do your job. So when you guys see guys doubling up on their ammunition, you know something's up. So we never carried that much ammunition before or afterwards, but boy, we were carrying heavy loads of ammunition, extra machine gun, extra grenades, God, everything else. So I knew something was going up. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out.
To add to that, we were going into an area that the American troops had never been in before. There was absolutely no intelligence, so we didn't know what we were going to encounter. So we, like Mike said, we went extra heavy. We carried a lot of extra ammunition, a lot of extra demolitions, and fortunately, Mike carried a lot of extra medical supplies because he put them to good use, and I think he used just about everything he had. I know we used all of our ammunition and everything we had. Hadn't we not come out the day we were extracted, we probably would have never left the area. It was that serious.
I think when I got to that Marine, I was down to shirt sleeves and bandanas. I think this young lady here. Yeah.
With Next Star Broadcasting. Now, you talked about being in that high intensity situation, and from the best of your you can recall, can you just describe how you handled that, how you remained calm and were able to administer help to others?
The way you maintain calmness in that situation is the fact that what the military does is put you through extensive training, and you train and you train and you train and you train. Now, this was not my first go around. I had been in a mission that with the Colonel and Lieutenant Brown, I think.
Yeah, Brown.
Yeah, and earlier, and I got through that one, And then, so I had been under fire at this, but you focus on what your job is. It's the same way with the other guys. I wasn't concerned with what the NBA were doing, because that wasn't my focus. Because I knew that the other guys were going to take care of the perimeter. My job was to focus on the individuals that were hurt. And when you focus in those kind of circumstances, you don't concern yourself about getting hurt or killed, because if you dwell on that or think about that, you're not going to be able to focus on what you're supposed to be doing, and you probably will get hurt or killed. So you just got to do your job and just keep on moving down the road. That's and now you got to understand, that's a 70-year-old man looking at what I think a 21-year-old did 50 years ago. If you'd asked me back then, I probably would. My answer would, I have no clue.
Anyone else? When Operation Tailwind was declassified, what was the conversation like with friends and family when they found out that you had been involved?
Well, a lot of people were surprised. At the time, you just told people what the report had been reported, that it didn't happen, and that was it.
So you just said to them what was in that, what you saw on TV, that's not really what happened.
That's basically it.
And then as details came out and you were able to talk about it, you know, what did you say to your wife? What did you say to your kids?
Well, Margaret will actually tell you that until we went to the Special Forces Association and we're sitting down with the colonel here and Bernie Bright and First Sergeant Adair, she will tell you until last June, she'd never even really heard me talk about it. So we might, I mean, it wasn't something we talked about.
She was an Army wife for a long time. She knew better than to ask you lots of questions.
I don't know if you'd have to ask that question, because I can tell you right now, I'm not answering for Margaret Mary Rose. I am not answering for that lady. No.
I have another question. So you retired from the Army eventually. You had a whole other career after this as an artillery officer. How did that experience in the Army compare to this really intense beginning of your career? And what was it like, carrying that around and being around other Vietnam veterans all the time and never, being able to talk about it?
Well, if you're not supposed to talk about something, you gave your word that you would not talk about it. So you don't. So you don't think about it. So it's not an issue. I just can't give you a better answer than that. We're professional soldiers, right, sir?
That's right.
And they said, this is what you're going to do, and this is what you're not going to do. And so you've raised your hand and you took an oath, and that's what you do. It's called service to your country and following the orders and those appointed above you.
It was something that we just didn't talk about. I mean, to us, it was, as professionals, it was a job. And even among the Special Forces friends, we didn't really discuss that and go into details, because they were out doing things just as crazy and just as dangerous, just as exciting, if you want to phrase it like that. And I don't, not that nobody, I didn't try to forget it, but I never really talked about it. When I came back, it wasn't until 30 years later, my children didn't actually know what went on. They knew something went on and knew that I was in combat and I'd been shot a couple of times. But as far as any details on the operation, it was something we just never talked about.
How did that experience of being, not just this, but being a Special Forces medic in Vietnam, how did that inform your career as an officer for all those years afterward?
Well, it's different because you're field artillery, so you're dealing with stuff that weighs a lot. I might add that I would say today, I think if you were to ask a young person or a senior officer like the colonel here about, and I don't mean to pull you into this, ma'am, but what I'm trying to say is if you were to ask somebody the same question today that's on active duty, they would probably just give you the same answer we did. If they were involved, I know if this colonel was involved in something that was classified and was told not to talk about, she's never going to bring it up to her husband or her children or her mother or father because she's a professional soldier, and that's what she's taken an oath to do. And it's called service to your country, and service to your country means you abide by the rules. We are a country of the rule of law, and that's what you should be doing.
It was just a quick question. Wondering what is it like for the two of you to be sitting side by side now, almost 50 years later?
Happy. We're alive.
Mm. Well, Mike and I, we've remained friends for a lot of years. So sitting next to him, is nothing new. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with him today, knowing he is going to be the recipient of the Medal of Honor.
I would also like to say that this gentleman, he's been giving me a lot of credit, but this guy here during those 4 days, he was controlling fighter aircraft, trying to bring in heavy lift Marine helicopters and Cobras. He's also directing the ground operations at the same time, and he would still come by along periodically with the first sergeant just to check on every one of us to see how we're doing. I mean, come by and just say, hey, how's things going? And probably, regardless of what the answer we gave him, and we probably knew there wasn't much he could really do to help us because his, the way the resources were. But just the fact that the man came by and you knew he was coming by just to boost your morale a little bit, that's the kind of man he was and he is. And I consider it a privilege, a great privilege, to count myself amongst one of his friends.
Did you know at the time that he was going to receive the Distinguished Service Cross and that had been his nomination had been downgraded? And what was your reaction to that?
I think that's your question, sir.
Yeah, that is your question.
I was terribly disappointed, to be honest. But that's just the way the system works, and we accepted it as it was and just tried to live with it as best we could.
And when did you get the idea that, ooh, maybe now we can go back and try to rectify this?
Well, we've been fighting for it for 47 years. I mean, the fight never stopped. We would lose ground and then we'd gain ground, and it was just a constant fight through all the years. And fortunately, we had contact and had a lot of help from Senator Sessions and other high-ranking VIPs that helped us and showed us the ropes. I mean, we were sort of stumbling around in the dark. We didn't know who to go to, and we got an awful lot of help from Senator Sessions and some of the others. I can't name names, and I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm really thankful for all of the help we got, and we certainly got a lot of excellent help in pushing this award through.
There's Representative Brooks in the House, and I also would like to. I think it's behooves both of us to. Unfortunately, the one man who was really pushing for this passed away about 4 years ago, and that was Colonel Sadler was the MACSOG commander at the time, and he called in a lot of chip to get us out because I found out recently that on that fourth day on that extraction point that they were only, they were only going to take out the wounded, and fortunately the colonel here was talking to the A1E SPAD pilot Tom Stump, and Stump told him, if you don't get them out all now, they're not getting out.
We weren't supposed to come out. When we didn't know that, but we weren't given much chance for survival, and real definite plans to extract us were never in the making until Colonel Sadler stepped in and said, "These men have got to come out, and I need your helicopters."
So you're continuing to learn details of your mission even up till now. Is that the case, or?
I didn't hear you.
You're still continuing to learn details of Operation Tailwind. They're still coming out, even for you who are part of it.
I can't speak to everybody, but I can tell you that every time I have a conversation and we start, talking to people, and some of the people have done extensive research and gone through all of the stuff. Yes, that is very true. There's a lot of things that I have learned almost constantly about it that I didn't know before. I think this gentleman has a question.
I'm back here with WVTM 13 in Birmingham, Alabama. You brought up Jeff Sessions and Mo Brooks. They're from Alabama. How, again, describe their role in this process and how crucial they were to helping you achieve this recognition.
Actually, the gentleman that you really should be asking that question would be Mr. Neil Thorne, who is a gentleman who has how many? Oh my God! He has gotten recognition for some 70 individuals, or help. From the Korean War and Vietnam, and even currently with some of the fellows over the last 15 years. Maybe the colonel.
Neil has become an expert on awards and decorations, and he is, like Mike said, he is very instrumental in getting individuals' awards upgraded that went through, for whatever reasons, their citations were never awarded. The citations they were submitted for was downgraded to a lesser medal, just like Mike was downgraded from the Distinguished Service Cross. He received the Service Cross in lieu of the Medal of Honor that was downgraded.
Hi guys, just checking in with you from the newsroom here in DC. I'm here with Joe Spivak, one of our photojournalists, getting ready to go out on a story himself. But I don't want to really cut this off because this is a pretty interesting precursor to, like we said, retired U.S. Army Captain Gary Mike Rose, who will be receiving at a ceremony at the White House on Monday the Medal of Honor. But I want to quickly bring you down to a live look. Also, I'll bring kind of the two-shot of a protest outside of a building in Austin, Texas, where Attorney General Jeff Sessions will be hosting an event. So we have some live footage of that coming up, so I'm just going to bring you down there. Split screen for both of these shots. All right, enjoy, guys.
He works for FEMA, and so I don't know where he might be in Puerto Rico, he might be in Texas, but he's up to his neck in FEMA operations right now.
Yeah, he's but there are a lot of people that have been involved in that, and so I even suspect that there's a lot of people that we don't even know their names that have pushed this along over the years in the background. So it's been what's great about it is there's a lot of people in the Department of Defense and other agencies have, I guess, like Congress, that have seen that this country needs to recognize these veterans for the service that they did, and the recognition didn't come at the time, and unfortunately, as time marches on, some of this recognition comes too late for the individual, but it does come to the family. So that's we cannot forget these men and women who have served this country so loyally and so valiantly and very quietly, and have continued to just, get out of the service and become and were and are good citizens, and they do all they can to make the world a little better place every morning, every day. Any other questions? Oh, this is easier than I thought.
Who were some of the battle buddies that are going to be at the White House with you on Monday?
Could we not use that?
use that term.
There were 16 of us involved on Tailwind. Two have passed away. 2 we cannot locate and haven't had any contact with them in since about 2000. But there's 12 still alive, and I managed to run them down and contact them in all 12. And in those 12, that's Mike and myself. So the other 10 will be with us sometime between now and Monday.
And that's from the company
That's from the ones that were on the ground with us. And in addition to that, we have Air Force pilots and Marine pilots who supported us. In all, we're going to have about 25 individuals here who participated in Tailwind one way or another.
You said 12 were going to be there on Monday?
Yes.
12.
Yes, that's included.
Including those 2, yes.
And don't forget that those Air Force pilots, they were like Tom Stump. I don't know how close to the ground he came when he came in on that final run to break up that charge that we were facing, because there were only 35 of us left on the ground, and we were probably down to about maybe 50 rounds between the 2 of us at that time. And he came in so close. When he turned his head and I looked up, I couldn't read his name, but I could see the lettering on his helmet. That's how low he was when he was coming in.
You could almost tell whether he'd shaved that morning. He came in right on top of us.
And the ground fire from the anti-aircraft was just horrendous at that time. The Marines were taking a pounding there. And I was told later that the Marine ground crews weren't telling the pilots, but when the Cobras were returning to refuel and refit and go back out, the ground crews were covering the holes up with 100-mile-an-hour tape and spray painting the tape, so the pilots, when they got back in, they didn't see all the holes in their ship.
I'd like to tell you a little story about Tom. We were at, and I don't remember what day, but we were really getting pounded heavy, and I was communicating by radio with Tom, who was in there flying over us and calling in ordnance, and I kept saying, bring it in closer, bring it in closer, bring it in 10 meters. And Tom said, that's getting mighty close. And I said, you still got to come in closer. I said, put it in my hip pocket. And he says, I'm coming in hot. Which pocket, right or left?
And I didn't hear that conversation, but I can tell you when he came over, I don't know if you know how an A1E dispenses its brass, but that brass just fell all around us. I don't know how no one got hurt, but at first I thought he had messed and was strafing us, but it was the brass from the 50 caliber was falling in on us. You know, that's pretty good sized stuff, and it probably a couple 100 miles an hour. It probably would hurt.
It's red hot also when it hits you.
If it was night, you could probably see it hit the ground. It would be glowing.
Very last quick question. Have either of you returned to Southeast Asia since your deployments?
No, I have not.
What was that question?
Have you been back to Vietnam or Laos?
No, I would like to go back, but the way the political situation is, I could not go into I worked with the mountain yards for 3 years, and I would like to go out into the areas where the mountain yards were, and since the mountain yards have been moved into Cambodia, there's probably very few mountain yards remaining in Vietnam. I would love to go back, but now my legs would not allow me to go.
Before we close, gentlemen, thank you for sharing your story. Any final thoughts?
I would just like to repeat what I said initially, that the Vietnam Air veteran, I think with this medal and the Presidential Unit Citation, regardless of what capacity you served in and what service you were in, it honors what they have done, because they did a great job. They were asked to do a very difficult thing, and they did it. And they fought hard, and unfortunately, a lot of them didn't come home. And I think this is a way to honor all their memories, is by honoring those of us that are left. So we kind of stand up for them and be a focal point on that honor.
Tailwind to me was just one of many assignments I had during my 3 years in Vietnam. The guys that went with him, we were proud professionals. A member of a brotherhood, and I think we served our country well. We did it for the love of our country because we believe in America, and I'm saying that in all honesty for all of the 15 men who were with me. We all believed in what we were fighting for and serving our country, and I don't know any better way to put it. We were just proud professionals doing what we were supposed to do. We weren't out seeking medals. Nobody thought about medals. We just thought about accomplishing what we had been asked to do.
Once again, gentlemen, thank you for sharing your story. This ends our media roundtable. We ask you to just stand by while our guests exit.
So again, guys, if you're watching us here on Fox 5 DC on our digital channel, Fox 5 Live, this was a roundtable that happened just a few hours ago with retired U.S. Army Captain Gary Mike Rose, and he'll be receiving the Medal of Honor on Monday at a ceremony at the White House. So we'll probably be covering that as well, as long as we get that in as one of our sources, our live sources for you. Also, at the bottom of your screen, I'm going to take this full screen now, is a protest going on live in Austin, Texas, outside of a Jeff Sessions event. And we're going to find out a little more information on that, bring it full screen, and bring up the volume on that.
All right, the marquee handle pin is now in. Black line is no longer visible. I do have a good pull test.
Copy. We're ready to drive the bolt.
You want? That was one ugly bead.
My name is Monserrat Garibay. I am the Secretary Treasurer of the Texas A.S.S. I'm glad to be here supporting you guys, supporting our immigrant community. The Texas A.S.S. is standing in solidarity with all immigrants in Texas and in the U.S. And we have one message to tell you, Jeff Sessions. You are not welcome here. You don't belong here. We are the immigrants that are making the U.S. the power country that it is because of the sweat that we have, that we've been doing this for a long time. We're here in our countries, our family lives here. We work very hard to have this country, to view this country, to have this country to the way that it is. And we're not going to let anybody, not you, any racist legislator, smash us. We're going to resist, we're going to get up, fight back, unite, and we're not alone. We might not be here many, not a lot of people are here, but believe me, we're organizing in our communities, we are identifying people, we're educating people, and we're mobilizing. Because yes, you know what, you're giving us fire in our belly to organize, and that's what we're going to do because we don't want hateful and racism in our country, in our communities, because our children, the future of this country, they're watching us, and people like you don't belong here, and we're going to let you know we're here to stay, and we're not going to let you spread your hate and racism and xenophobia in our community. So Jeff Sessions, you're not welcome here. Get your shit and leave us. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Danny. I'm with us out of Texas. A whole bunch of us just got back from Washington, D.C. One of the things we did was literally took it to Sessions' house because his policies that Trump administration is following and choosing is very detrimental to the freedom and the liberty of people with disabilities. And the people with disabilities include everybody, brown, Mexicanos, queer, lesbian. So we're all part of the same team, and we should all be.
Him to this office and to present him to you, the United States Attorney General, Jefferson B. Sessions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to be in town, and this great United States Attorney's Office, one of the great ones in our country for sure. And we had the opportunity to meet with our federal and state federal officers, leadership of our federal agencies earlier this morning too, and discuss the challenges they face. I believe Texas Solicitor General Scott Keller is here. Scott, yeah, good to see you back there, and I appreciate your legal skill. And it was an honor last night to be able to have dinner with Governor Abbott and discuss a lot of issues important to our country. So, Richard, thank you for your many years of leadership. You've been a crime fighter for 3 decades plus, I guess, and thank you for that experience. So I'd like to thank all of you and to recognize the selfless and dedicated law enforcement officers here who have put their lives on the line every day, who run toward danger for the benefit of us all. Thank you. On behalf of President Trump, it is an honor to be with you all, with the selfless and courageous men of law enforcement. President Trump and his Department of Justice understand your mission. He has directed us to support that mission and to support you in one of his first executive orders. We call it Support the Men in Blue order. And we are committed to doing just that. The president ran for office as a law and order candidate. He's now governing as a law and order president. Under that leadership, we are getting serious about crime and the rule of law, and we're finally getting serious about illegal immigration. We have the most generous immigration laws in the world, and for decades we've always pulled back, unfortunately, from actual effective enforcement. I used to say in the debates in the Senate, Congress will pass most anything as long as it doesn't work. If it works, we have a hard time getting it passed. But earlier this month, the president released his principles for fixing the immigration system. Let me just say, they are a breath of fresh air. For decades, the American people have been begging and pleading with our elected officials for an immigration system that's lawful and serves the national interest. Now we have a president who supports that. The principles he laid out with every aspect of our immigration problems are dealt with. Everything from border security to interior enforcement to closing loopholes in our asylum program. It's the kind of bold agenda that the American people have been waiting for and have been promised. It's reasonable. It's a solid legal plan. And importantly, it will work. It will fix so many of the problems we face. And let me just say one thing. We've already seen a substantial reduction in the illegal flow into our country. That has been accomplished, I guess, mostly by the president's own clear message. But what I would say to you, if we keep this virtuous spiral going, if we keep the flow down, then it's more and more easy for our officers to confront the smaller number that's coming illegally. We are at a point where we can fix this system. Lawfully, file for lawful entrance and wait your turn. And to better do that, the president has proposed hiring more than 10,000 ICE officers, 1,000 new ICE attorneys, 300 new prosecutors, and nearly 400 new immigration judges to deal with the backlog we're facing. He's proposed switching to a more merit-based system of immigration, like that Canada has. I have talked with Canada's officials over the years. They are thrilled and pleased with their merit-based system. They would never go back. He's proposed that we welcome the best and brightest, turning away the gang members, the fraudsters, drunk drivers, and child abusers. This merit-based system would better serve our national interests because it would benefit the American people. So that's what this agenda is about. We can't accept everybody that would like to come to America. We should accept those who are prepared to live lawfully and who can flourish and prosper in America. And that's why the President supports mandating the use of the E-Verify system, which is an internet-based system that allows employers to verify that those they hire are legally authorized to work in the United States. Under the plan, it would be illegal to discriminate against American workers in favor of foreign workers. How simple is that? We need this agenda, and Texans know that probably better than anybody. I'm sure everyone in this room remembers the police officer, Kevin Will, an illegal alien who had been deported twice, drove drunk, and hit Officer Will at about 90 miles per hour. His last words were telling someone to get out of the way of the car. He died protecting innocent people. And when he died, his wife was pregnant with their first child. The Open Borders Lobby talks a lot about good kids, those who are here, though unlawfully. But the open borders policies aren't even in their interest either. After the previous administration announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, policy in 2012, the number of unaccompanied children coming here nearly doubled that year. It sent a message. The next year, it doubled again. I doubt that was a coincidence. DACA encouraged potentially tens of thousands of vulnerable children to make a trip to the north. And that has terrible humanitarian consequences, and I think Texans know that firsthand. Earlier this month, Border Patrol arrested 2 young men who had benefited from DACA for allegedly attempting to smuggle illegal aliens into Laredo. Just a few days later, another beneficiary of DACA was charged with the murder of an 18-year-old girl. In total, 2,000 DACA recipients who were accepted into the program have had their status withdrawn because of these kind of activities. The President wants to stop the incentives for vulnerable children to come here illegally. There's nothing wrong with that. He began to do that last month when he ended the DACA policy. The President also laid out a plan to close loopholes that are being exploited in our asylum system. Under the previous administration, the federal government began releasing illegal aliens who claimed to be afraid to return to their countries. Unsurprisingly, the number of these claims skyrocketed nearly 20-fold in 8 years, from 5,000 in 2009 to 94,000 last year. After their release, many of these people simply disappear, do not show back up for court. It's too easy to defraud our system right now, and the President Trump's policies will fix that. His plans to close the loopholes will stop the incentive for false asylum claims, and the President is also confronting the state and local jurisdictions that have undertaken to undo our immigration laws through so-called sanctuary policies. Such policies undermine the moral authority of law and undermine the safety of the jurisdictions that adopt them. Police are forced to release criminals back into the community no matter what crimes they commit, in addition to being here unlawfully. Think about it. Police may be forced to release pedophiles, rapists, murderers, drug dealers, arsonists back into the community where they have no right to be in the first place. They should, according to law and common sense, be processed with our federal I.S.S. officers and be deported. These policies hinder the work of federal law enforcement They're contrary to the rule of law.
But what I want to speak with you today is about how Jeff Sessions has affected my life as a criminal defense attorney. As a criminal defense attorney, I've been fighting my entire career to end mass incarceration, to curb systemic racism in our justice system. And we still have a long way to go. Even under Obama, we made progress, but we had a long way to go. But the progress was pulling back on private prisons, rolling them back, making it so that those prosecutors up there on the 10th floor of the U.S. Attorney's Office, they had discretion to negotiate under mandatory minimums. And then Jeff Sessions came along. And what was the first thing this administration did? They rolled back the repeals of private prisons. In exchange for what? Money. These private prisons gave Donald Trump $250,000 each first week of his inauguration. And then immediately they rolled it back. And then the next thing Jeff Sessions did, he made sure we're going to fill those prisons. He told those prosecutors up on the 10th floor, you no longer can negotiate with defense attorneys to go under mandatory minimums. People that are accused of drug crimes have to go to prison for 10 years, and you have no discretion to oppose it. Well, I'm fed up with that, and that's why I joined this race, and we're going to take it to Washington and make Jeff Sessions go back to Alabama, and we're going to restore our unity and our democracy and work back towards ending mass incarceration and keep on that path that we started under Barack Obama. Thank you very much. Schools, not prisons! 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 Schools, not prisons!
Rather than reconsider their policies, many sanctuary jurisdictions feign outrage when they lose federal funds as a direct result of actions that are designed to nullify federal law and obstruct its enforcement. Some have even decided to go to court so they can keep receiving taxpayer-funded grants while continuing to impede federal law enforcement. We intend to fight this resolutely. We cannot continue to give federal grants to cities that actively undermine the safety of federal law officers and intentionally frustrate their efforts to reduce crime in their own cities. These jurisdictions that knowingly, willfully, and purposefully release criminal aliens back into their communities are risking the lives and safety of American citizens in the pursuit of what really is an extreme open borders policy. It's extreme and an open borders policy because if a jurisdiction won't even deport someone who enters the country illegally and then commits another crime while they're in the country, then who will they deport? Anybody or nobody? This isn't just bad policy. It's a direct challenge to the laws of the United States. It places the lives of our fine law enforcement officers at risk. And I cannot and will not.
Hi guys, just checking in with you from the newsroom at Fox 5 DC. We're on Fox 5 Live here on our YouTube channel. We're bringing you this Jeff Sessions event in Austin, but also we have a feed, a shot of the protests that are outside. So we're going to be switching between the audio so we can kind of get a balanced view of what's happening down there. Again, this is in Austin, Texas. I didn't actually see this on the schedule for today, but this just came up on our live source, so we're going to stay with this for just a bit as we have this duo shot of Jeff Sessions himself giving the speech and then protesters outside. You can see some news people, of course. There was a criminal justice lawyer and some others involved in the protest outside. So we'll bring that sound up next.
What else do we want? Humanity first, not America first. Humanity first, not America first. I like that one. What else do we want? Freedom! 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 That's what we want. What else? Money! That's right. Yeah, we do want some money. Livable wage? We want to defund the police. Stop police killing black and brown folks. We want peace. Come on, folks. I'm giving you space to say whatever the stuff that you want. Equal rights, jobs, what else? Monday? A taco stand in every corner of Puerto. I'm not even talking about how Mexico-centric that is. That's okay.
Make it that no one's illegal.
We want to make it so that no one's illegal. Clear trans liberation, thank you. We want unity, not divisiveness. And the Electoral College. Justice. Hey folks, we need more of imagination here. What else do we want? I'm like, in the perfect world, what else would you want? Peace. Affordable integration housing. Affordable integration housing. That's right. And gentrification. We want Trump locked up. Okay. Trump out of the White House. Trump out of the White House. What else? Healthcare for all. What did you say?
Can somebody walk me to my bus after I say we want Trump out the White House?
Can someone walk him to his bus? Yeah. That's like an actual request. Can someone walk him to his bus after we get Trump out of the White House? What else?
We want all our corrupted politicians out of office.
All our corrupted politicians out of office, so we got to start all over again.
Money out of politics.
Money out of politics. What else?
Citizens United. Socialists to go home.
And socialists, and socialists, wait, what is this? Sorry.
Citizens United.
And Citizens United. We want Jeff Sessions to go home. Get the hell out of Austin. We want Jeff Sessions deported. We want Sally Hernandez to have a backbone. And what? And gerrymandering. What do we want though? I mean, I like end gentrification in Austin. Right? Get weasels out of the White House. We need Trump control of the White House.
And marijuana prohibition.
And marijuana prohibition. We're legalizing things now. What? Free all political prisoners? Free all prisoners.
Environmental justice.
Environmental justice.
We want Jeff Sessions deported to North Korea.
Wait, hold on. Why are we doing North Korea wrong like that? Hold on, no. What was it? And the death penalty?
Bodily autonomy.
Hold on. One more that I heard right before I gave the mic. Bodily autonomy?
Can we get right back to that? My name is Daniel Ramirez. I work for United We Dream Austin. We do local citizenship drives that get Hispanic residents to apply for citizenship, to increase the Hispanic voice, the Hispanic vote, the visibility of the Hispanic community. And we have one coming up on November 4th, which we need volunteers for. We also do Know Your Rights trainings, and that we can train people for. We also need volunteers for. Up until recently, we've been doing DACA clinics, but apparently that's not a thing anymore. If you're interested,
Trash ass motherfuckers!
Smoking my goddamn house. Got me locked up for 3 months. So fucking truck, and now I got a assault case for the fucking trucking. If you're interested in volunteering, then please find me. And if you have a pen, I could also use a pen. Thank you. Yeah, find me. I'm gonna be over here. If you're interested in volunteering, it'd be awesome. Thanks a lot.
I always have to remember where this mic is at. So I think that what we're going to do, right, because Jeff Sessions was supposed to start speaking at 11:50. Do you want to start? So I think
I think that the most important thing, never mind. So we're gonna move, right? Who's gonna lead us in movement? Allá. Aquí está el brazo. All right, we're gonna go this way. Do we want to get on the sticks 2x2? Yeah.
If anybody is not registered to vote, please come see me and everybody needs to be registered and needs to vote.
If you can vote, that's also okay. If you can. Just put that out there because I can't vote. All right, it's time for Jeff Sessions to see us right. He's supposed to be speaking at 11:50. His entire caravan is over there waiting for us. So, do we want to get lined up behind the person with the megaphone? Yes! That was a request more than a question. Line up. We have two people with megaphones, and they're both right here.
Would you like to join us for lunch?
In front of the person with the megaphone. We're not so low. Can I take a picture of us on the left?
Alice, oh, really? Come and take me in a picture. Want to? Want to? With Amanda? Are y'all in this picture? All right. What do we say? Jeff Sessions down to here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. It's really fun. Really fun. You can call me Kathy. What? Oh, it's a lifelong learning. Yeah, it's not Spanish. It's a little. So somebody asked me to teach a poetry course with him in Spanish. He teaches advanced Spanish. This is whole group of students who kind of take his class every single term. His name is David Bryce. No, it's an independent group. Yeah. No, they're classes. They're classes. Yeah. I know what you do. Yeah. So they have everything learning. Right. Well, they have like 70 classes every term that they teach. No, it's just but it might as well. That's what it is. Yeah. See, next time. See, habla español.
Especially now, this section, this map section is so outdated.
Hey guys, just checking in with you from the newsroom. I have a couple of people, they're walking away from me now, so they're not here, but Bryce is back. She's just saying hey from social media. Obviously this protest is kind of wrapping up, and Bryce, you've been working on some stuff for the day. So I want to actually take you over to a really cool event. This is actually really cool, Bryce. Did you see this morning? First Lady Melania Trump donated her inaugural dress to the Smithsonian. So kind of a cool thing. We see, these the First Lady's dresses there over the years, and officially it was a gorgeous dress. Beautiful. With just lots of feet, so I'll switch it over. But yeah, I want to show you that event from this morning. Again, the First Lady donated her inaugural dress to the museum, and so we're going to check in on what that entailed. There was a little speech and stuff. Oh, they just switched us over to NASA. Now? She's not, unfortunately. This was a little earlier in the morning.
Oh, okay.
But anything else that you're working on now that came up for the day, or?
As of right now, still hunting the internet's crypt for interesting, deals and freebies happening on Halloween, because we like to bring those to you guys. save a dollar or two, absolutely, I'm all for it. I'm wearing this if you guys are wondering why, because it's
chilly
freezing in my neck of the corner yonder that way. So just trying to stay a little bit warm, proactive on this Friday afternoon.
Awesome, Risa. Well, let's jump into this cool First Lady event from this morning.
Awesome.
Give you guys a little taste of that, and then we'll switch it up if we have anything else that's coming in live or different. Again, kind of a slower day right now in the middle of the day. Nothing really pressing coming in, but we'll make sure we hit that when we have it. All right, guys, over to Melania Trump from this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen and members of the media, please remain in your seats or positions while the gown is removed from the stage to be installed in the First Lady's exhibition. For those
of what I wanted for such a historic evening. When sitting down with Hervé to discuss my vision, I expressed a desire for modern, sleek, light, unique, and unexpected look. I must tell you that it can be a daunting task to choose an outfit that will be mesmerized and become part of our nation's story and forever history. I was so pleased with our end result, and it is now my hope that this piece is one of the many great beginnings to our family's history here in Washington, D.C. The President, Baron, and I love living here, and we are so honored to represent this country. The Smithsonian has the unique honor and ability to freeze time and tell future generations the stories of our nation's history. I'm so honored and grateful to become part of this history, and thank you all for being here with me today. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. I have had a passion for design from a very young age and had a very precise idea of what I wanted for such a historic evening. When sitting down with Hervé to discuss my vision, I expressed a desire for modern, sleek, light, unique, and unexpected look. I must tell you that it can be a daunting task to choose an outfit that will be mesmerized and become part of our nation's story and forever history. I was so pleased with our end result, and it is now my hope that this piece is one of the many great beginnings to our family's history here in Washington, D.C. The President, Baron, and I love living here, and we are so honored to represent this country. The Smithsonian has the unique honor and ability to freeze time and tell future generations the stories of our nation's history. I'm so honored and grateful to become part of this history, and thank you all for being here with me today. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
All right, guys, it looks like they have this event sort of on a loop, on a repeat, but that's just a little taste of First Lady Melania Trump donating her dress this morning to the National Museum of American History, part of the Smithsonian group in D.C. So I'm going to switch it over to just kind of showing you a variety of video. Yesterday, in case you missed it, former President Obama was in town in Virginia, in Northern Virginia area, to campaign for Ralph Northam for governor of Virginia. So he was expected to do this. It was later in the evening. And in case you missed it, we're going to stream it here. So it's yesterday's event. Current governor Terry McAuliffe opens the event, and then former president also makes his appearance to campaign for this Democratic candidate for governor. The governor's race in Virginia is heating up. We've been talking about it for weeks now on our shows and whatnot here on Fox. So let's jump over there to that event from yesterday so you can check into that.
stations on ELC-2. We're going to take you back to the Pentagon. The commander of the Army Corps of Engineers is holding a briefing in the Pentagon briefing room. This is Sources Pool, and it's streamable.
And it will be removed.
P1, good work. Nicole, we're showing this photo is complete.
Copy. Thanks for the photos. When you're happy, you can give the arm a go to maneuver to the lead loop back off.
Stand by.
Comrade, I have the same caution as before to minimize loads on the pump module MLI handholds. The handholds may tear off.
Okay. I thought this strap was one piece, and if we pulled on it here, it would slide through. Is that not the case? So I have Velcro on the top I have to release?
Checking.
Fellow March, I am clear of the arm. Have to go to the lead loop back off position.
Copy. We'll put it in work. Thank you.
And Randy Bresnik at the stowage platform right outside the Quest airlock ESP-2 as he begins work to configure the second of the two spare pump modules for future use if necessary. Again, removing some of the thermal insulation straps and breaking torque, high launch load torque on 4 bolts on that spare pump module. Again, all in preparation for any future use or requirement to replace a failed pump module with one of these spares. We're now just past the 5.5-hour mark in the spacewalk.
Perhaps you do need to release some Velcro up there. So you could translate on the pump module. Just be cautious so that you don't tear off any of the handholds. And then if you release the Velcro at the top, then we think that that one strap should pull all the way through.
Ended up going up there, and it wasn't Velcro. It was just the fact that the strap makes a right turn, and the strap loops that were holding it there just weren't giving, and so you had to feed it through.
Okay, we copy. Thank you. And Joe, when the arm is clear, we'll take a glove and hap check.
Okay, right glove looks good. Left glove, same, and hap is dry.
Copy. Nice work. Once you have everything buttoned up, you have a go to egress the APFR.
That's in work.
Okay, comrade, we don't have WVSS, so just letting you know it's the same type of a central Velcro strap that you'll release, and then you should be able to open the forward flap of the pump module.
Give you one copy. Thanks.
Joe Acaba now cleaning up the work site where he has been for the past hour or so, using a grease gun to lubricate a series of linear bearing tracks on the latching end effect.
For joining us today. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nina Hill from the Office of the Chief of Public Affairs. Today's press conference will focus on the United States Corps of Engineers and their relief efforts in Florida, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Today, we have Lieutenant General Todd T. Semonite. He is the U.S. Army Chief of Engineers and the Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. General Semonite will give a brief opening statement, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. I'd ask that you please state your name and your affiliate, and then also limit yourself to one question and one follow-up until we've gotten around the room, and then we'll continue to field questions afterwards. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Todd Semonite.
Well, thanks, Nina, for that introduction. And as Nina said, I am the Chief of Engineers in the Army, and I'm the Commanding General of the Corps of Engineers. I think it's important to point out that I really work under 3 different authorities, and we talk about these disasters here. I'm really based, our guys are working in all 3 of them. So we do an awful lot of work for the Department of Defense, okay, as the Corps of Engineers. We also have our specific authorities in the Civil Works mission, which is rivers and harbors and a lot of other missions there, and we'll talk about that on one of the dams we're working. And then we also have very, very specific mission for FEMA. As you know, there are several emergency support functions for FEMA. We provide that function, which is the engineering function, emergency support function number 3. I really can talk about any one of the last 4 storms. We've been going all out for the last 6 weeks. Probably about 2,000 people throughout the Corps of Engineers, with a lot of functions throughout Texas with Harvey, of course with Irma in Florida, Irma when it hit the Virgin Islands, and then when Maria came through, it really hit both the Virgin Islands and it hit Puerto Rico. The other one was Nate that came through and came up through Mississippi, and we did not have a lot of involvement about it. But when you think about the ability of the Department of Defense and FEMA to be able to handle 4 major storms in 6 weeks, I think that's something that is a real compliment to both of the agencies, because you're able to not only take care of the storm you're working right now, but be able to look forward at that next storm and to be able to predict and have the right teams to be able to react. If there was 2 messages I would want to tell you that would clearly be something that I learned in all these. I've been on the ground several times in all these different operations. I think it's the word passion and urgency. And I'll tell you that, first of all, from the people that I see on the ground. I mean, I went into the backside of Harvey when we saw people down there flooded out in Buffalo Bio, and I looked in their eyes and I saw the challenge of how could they get their lives back together. And they definitely had a passion to try to continue to get back to a way of normal, but they also wanted an urgency from the federal government. I think probably what hit me the most, last week I was in Puerto Rico. We're doing blue roofs. I'll talk about that in a minute. And I went down to a house. We had to work our way down through the debris to get down into Maurice's house. Maurice was an E6 in the Army, and he since got out, and he was in there trying to cook breakfast in his house, but he had no roof. And so we had a contractor crew that came up and put plywood on top of that and a blue roof to cover over his area. And when Maurice came out and talked to my guys and the contractors that were working there, again, same thing. He had a passion to continue to try to get back to normal, but he also had an urgency. And this is something that, as I look at the people that have been affected there, it's where we're all in. Whatever we can do, we're continuing to go as fast as we possibly can. The other end of that dimension, though, which is just as important, is the passion and the urgency I see here in Washington, D.C., to continue to be able to try to get these people back to normal. I was in the White House 2 hours ago, and I saw that from the members of the cabinet who are fully committed to be able to continue to commit the resources needed to be able to do what we needed to do. Several times I've been in the Department of Defense, OSD, the Secretary, the deputies, continuing to be able to push us along with NORTHCOM, the Defense Logistics Agency, to be able to step up where need be, to be able to ask, what else can we possibly do to go forward? And then on several of these storms, General Milley, the Chief of Staff of the Army, 5 o'clock for many, many nights in a row, had the entire Army staff in there to try to figure out how can we as the Army continue to step up to do what we need to do to be able to help these people out there. And I'll talk a little bit about more of the support that we've gotten from DLA and the JFLIC team, Lieutenant General Jeff Buchanan and his team down on the ground. So when we come into these disasters, we normally do 5 major functions. And we've got an infographic on the side here, and I can certainly answer questions about any of them. I'm going to end with the electricity because that's probably what's most important. We basically have done these 5 functions in all 4 of the big areas. But the ones that I just kind of want to highlight them, first of all, ports. We do have authorities under our Civil Works Authority. Almost every one of these disasters took out several of the ports, sometimes 14 or 15 ports. You've got to be able to get logistics into these areas to get supplies back in. So whether it was Texas, Florida, Virgin Islands, or Puerto Rico, how do we come in the day after the storm, survey those storms, and survey those ports, and be able to get dredges and barges in there to be able to continue to get materials in and out. Working hand by hand with the Coast Guard, who's instrumental in doing that, but a significant port mission, and we can certainly talk about during questions if you want. Next big mission is debris. So an awful lot of trees that are down. Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands is where we probably saw the biggest deal of debris. So we come in with big contractors that we already have on contract ahead of time, and then we go back out and we immediately start picking up debris on the sides of the roads and putting them in large trucks. We take it to a special area, and we're able to get it out of the road so people have mobility. It's not just the vegetation debris, it's also debris that's in people's houses. So we actually sort it. We have places for refrigerators, we have places for old mattresses, hazardous waste. Our contractors, we tell everybody to put it out on the side of the road. The contractor comes by, he picks up that debris, and we get it out of the lane again so people can get back to normal. I think another big mission, which is really picking up traction in Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, is what we call the Blue Roof Mission. If you have a house, and it actually has to have 50% of the house that is still in a feasible manner there, then we come back in and we will put a blue tarp over the roof. And we have learned that if we can put the tarp on in a couple weeks or a month, then we're able to really continue to be able to protect that house. What we found in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands is that a lot of times there was a lot of structural damage to that particular house. So we had to come in and almost rebuild part of the roof structure to be able to get the tarp back up and over. And you can see on the numbers here on some of the things that we've done. I think in Florida, I don't have Florida on this particular infographic, but 7,000 blue roofs in Florida. So the contractor will go right on down the street, take out the blue tarps. And this is just not a regular tarp. This is an engineer that comes in and actually stretches that over, be able to nail it back up under your gutters, and continue to be able to do what we need to do to be able to make things happen. The last big mission I really want to talk about is that there are areas where we have dams and reservoirs and infrastructure in here, so we go back in and we assess that infrastructure. We have programs that if a police station gets wiped out, we can build a temporary building. We can go back in and help get a school up and running. And we also have challenges with the civil works infrastructure. The dam that is down in Puerto Rico is one that you're probably tracking. This is one of the Puerto Rican government dams that basically had an awful lot of water went into it. The water went over the top of the dam, the spillway, and then that spillway basically failed. This is very similar to the dam in Orville. And what happened is so much water coming down that spillway that had not come down in many, many years that the spillway started to break up and crumble. And about the bottom 50% of that spillway basically washed away. The water continued to come over for about 20 days. The challenge is we had a lot of rain, and there was no other way to get that water back out. So we did 2 big things. First of all, came in with a lot of Jersey barriers. These are things like you would protect if you're trying to fence off something. We put in over 500 Jersey barriers into that area, and then what we call these super big sandbags, ones that we deliver from helicopters. This is where the Department of Defense and the National Guard Bureau is invaluable, whether it was the Marines dropping them in, the National Guard, helicopters day after day putting in an awful lot of sandbags, and you can see on the numbers there, but just a massive amount of capability. If we didn't continue to put that level of material in, then the water coming down the spillway would have actually eroded the dam, and we had risk of the dam failing, and a lot of people living downstream from the dam. So we had to stabilize that particular spillway so that it wouldn't erode. And then the other big thing is we brought a lot of pumps in to be able to, and they're now pumping, so that if there is a storm in the next several months, how do we pump that water out so that we don't continue to have that? That whole structure is going to have to be rebuilt. That's something that Congress is going to have to decide what is the capability to be able to do that. But that is a significant challenge on the spillway. So I think the thing you're probably most interested in is electricity. We've had electrical challenges in Texas and in Florida, but they were quickly taken care of by the governors of those two states, and a lot of capability that came into those particular states. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands is a completely different paradigm. People have asked me in the last several weeks, why don't you do in Puerto Rico what you could have done in Florida? Because it is an island, and it is very, very hard to just drive hundreds of pole trucks and hundreds of material down into Virgin Islands and down into Puerto Rico. So our strategy here is fourfold, and I'm going to talk about 4 lines of effort, and then we can get into details on any one of those. The first thing is temporary generators. We are putting right now probably about 400 to 500 temporary generators in Puerto Rico. Normally we do 40 to 50. Then they're in there about a week or two, and then we come back in and we take them back out because the grid is back up. This is going to be a massive long-term rebuild of rebuilding the grid in Puerto Rico. So what we are doing is to go all out and put as many generators in we can, maybe in public facilities. The key places is that we got a list from the governor. All the mayors donated to that list, and the list has got about 428 different requirements on it today. I think I got about 10 more today that come in, and so we know exactly what the priorities of the governors are of where should we have electricity. Hospitals are on the top of the list. Then you have water facilities, wastewater facilities. What about things like cell phone tower areas? How do we continue to take care of government facilities? Schools were a big thing to be able to get the schools up and running. So how do you continue to put those generators in? These are not a generator like you would buy at a great big, convenience store downtown. This is a generator that's pulled behind an 18-wheeler. Some of these are 30 and 40 feet long. Major generation capability to go back in. As of today, we got 148 of those installed. We've got about another 280 on hand, and we've got about another 130 coming in. This is where there is no lack of generators. And when I need extra help, and we need extra help, the Defense Logistics Agency and FEMA have come forward to be able to continue to fly in, barge in generators to be able to help make that happen. We have a 911 generator crew. I have a battalion. This is the 249th Engineer Battalion. We have it in the Army. And that battalion basically has got a team so that 3 o'clock in the morning, about a weekend ago, we had a clinic on one of the islands in Vieques that went down. A generator went down on there. We put 2 generators on the barge. Our soldiers took that generator over, installed it, and got that back up and running by the end of the day because they had that level of agility to be able to get that generator back in. So how long are those generators going to be there? They're going to be there until the grid gets back up. The goal is to get 100% of power back to everybody on Puerto Rico. It's just that some of these generators could be there for months and months on end. There's another area, and we're trying to look at where are there problems in the system. There are places in Puerto Rico where there were hospitals that had a generator. It's an old generator. So it was actually running. Now what we've done is we've come in with a contractor to service those generators to be able to make sure they're getting the oil change, they're getting the fuel they need. And if in fact we find an older generator that we don't think is going to be able to carry the load, we'll take that generator back out and we'll put a FEMA generator in to be able to make sure that we can continue to have reliable power to those critical facilities. We can't do houses. We're mainly looking at big, large facilities to keep them going. So that's really the temporary generator, and that's kind of this line of effort 1 on this 4 different prong approach. Line of effort 2 is really generation, and this is where we really have our work cut out for us in the long term. Generation is power plants. We need about 2,500 megawatts of power throughout Puerto Rico to be able to restore the power back up to where it was at the beginning of the storm. Today, right now, we've got about 21.6% of that up. The real technical number is about 579 megawatts that's online, and we continue to put 2 or 3 more % back up and running. But the challenge we have, and I'll refer to the chart over here a little bit, most of the electricity, I'll slide this over a little bit closer here, most of the big power plants are down in the south, and this is where they were built, and so there's an awful lot of generation capability down in the south. Most of the load is up in the north. And to be specific, there are 7 large power plants that normally run off of fossil fuel. There's about 7 power plants that run off of solar or wind. And then there's 21 power plants that actually are hydro, big dams that make electricity with water. But the majority of that power is down on the south sector. And again, the load is up in San Juan. So the challenge is, how do you continue to get that electricity from south to north? Even if, in fact, all of the power plants are up and running, we would have a generation shortfall. So about a week and a half ago, we cut a contract to a large company to come back in and place a temporary power plant in San Juan. That arrived a week ago. It came off a gigantic barge, and that power plant is being built today and will be up by the end of October. That'll put another 50 megawatts into the grid in what I will call this island of San Juan. It's an island of power because that's where these power plants are, and they're basically around the perimeter of the island. The other problem we have is, what's the reliability of the generation that's out there? All we're going to do is to be able to get that generation up to 100%. But the question is that good enough, and how long will that stay? So this is a report, 271 pages long, that was done by an independent firm back in 2016, and it talks about how frail this network is, how frail these generators are. The average age of those 7 fossil fuel power plants is 44 years old. So this is a very, very old system. There's actually one of the power plants up here in San Juan that was actually shut down 7 weeks before the storm because it had massive maintenance challenges. So even when we bring this back up, all we're going to do is to be able to get it up to that given level to have 100% of power. And this is where the bigger question is, what's the long-term plan for Puerto Rico? And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about the end of the 4. So we talked about temporary power. We talked about generation. Now I want to talk about transmission. The number one goal right now of what the Corps is doing is to be able to move this electricity that's in the south up to the north. So this is really a grid of transmission lines. Transmission lines are very, very tall towers, about 75 feet high, and they go all throughout Puerto Rico. The blue ones are actually what's called the 230 kV. The red ones are a little bit smaller, but again, very, very large power lines. Most of the transmission is in not bad shape, but there's an awful lot of requirements to continue to be able to get some of these lines up and running. We probably need 3 lines from the south to the north across the mountain to be able to continue to put enough electricity up in San Juan. Today we have 1, so right now the crews are out working the 2nd and 3rd line to be able to continue to move that up. Once we connect south to north, it really is kind of like a network. It's like a table with 4 legs. It's much, much more sturdy because you're able to backfeed those power plants from different sizes. So that's really what the big focus is, to get the transmission up and running. We probably need about 338 towers. These are these 75-foot towers. So the team's building this, and to be able to continue to fly them back in. And then we need an awful lot of connectors and cable as well. But the whole goal is to get the transmission up and running. And I want to stress up here right up front is that we're partners side by side with not only the governor's office, but the Puerto Rico Power Authority, PREPA. And we've got to be able to continue to understand it's their system. We're working side by side to understand what the priorities are. But PREPA's doing an awful lot of work. We've got some of our soldiers in there from one of our battalions in, and then we've got a lot of contractors coming in. The Corps of Engineers just awarded a very, very large contract with $240 million with a capacity to go over over $1 billion to the Fluor company. They're mobilizing right now of bringing pole trucks in, people, a lot of capability in to be able to get to a total of 435 crews is what we're shooting for between PREPA and our contractors. We also just awarded another large contract from the state of Florida to be able to continue to work to be able to get this transmission up and running. So that's the third big line of effort. But even once we get the transmission running throughout all of Puerto Rico, the problem is going to be how do you get that down to the people? And that's what we call distribution. So this is when you have houses with power poles, the poles and the lines to be able to continue to connect those. And this is where the real challenge is. We need 62,000 poles to be able to get this up and running. And we haven't done a 100% assessment of all this, but based on what we assess right now with several different flights over this network and talking to our teammates in PREPA, that was 62,000 poles. We're probably going to need about 6,500 miles of wire. Just imagine 6,500 miles of electrical wire. You say, why can't this be done faster? The average trained crew on a flat football field can probably put 2 poles in a day. You don't have a flat football field. You've got a road with down the trees in it, and when you go up to where to replace that line, all these telephone poles are all these power poles are leaning over. All the old cables still on it. So you've got to strip all that back out and completely rebuild that grid. So it's going to take a lot of time for 435 crews to be able to get all of those poles up and running and get them in ground. This is a massive logistics challenge. And so we're bringing in about $150 million right now of cable and poles. This is coming in with a lot of support from the FEMA team and DLA, Defense Logistics Agency. And we've got basically large logistics bases. We'll put one in the east, the north, the south, and the west to be able to receive those. And the challenge is going to be how do you get them up in the top of some of those mountains to be able to take care about that. You're going to ask, what about time? So this is the challenge. There's some of these lines that we know relatively well. We can drive and see them. The crews have assessed them, and we know where we're at. The governor has made a milestone of trying to get 30% of the Puerto Rican load up by the end of October, and then 50% by the end of November. I personally think those are stretch goals, but we're very, very committed to trying to meet where the governor's at, and all of our guys are going all out with every single thing we can to meet the governor's goals. The challenge is going to be, how do you get past 50%? And I personally think that it's going to go into January and February to get the majority of the back up and running. The challenge is going to be, there's what I call the last mile. Up on one of these mountains, I flew over it last week, there's a couple houses up there that are fed by one line that comes up the side of a cliff. And then it goes down about 2 or 3 miles, and there's 2 houses on the end. It's going to take a long time to get those. I've been saying for a couple of weeks it could take almost up to a year. I'd like to think we could get that done by the end of May, but there are going to be some people on Puerto Rico in very, very remote locations that are going to need power for a long, long time. And so this is where it goes back to this whole idea about passion and urgency. Every single thing we can possibly do, the federal government, FEMA, the Department of Defense is doing to step up, and we're trying to continue to shorten those timelines. I certainly hope that I'm wrong and that we can go an awful lot faster, but what I don't think it is smart to do is to give false hope to those people that are in very, very remote, austere locations that the power is going to be on next week, because in some of these it's going to be a hard build. The last thing I'll end with is the most significantly damaged area is really this east end. The distribution out here is almost 100% down. So that's where, while we have other areas that we can come up and run, and we're seeing power on now down in the southwest area. I talked about San Juan, that's up and running. But how do we continue to be able to push that power all the way down to the last house? And I'll just end with this fact that it's where our 2,000 people on the ground, Jeff Buchanan's, his thousands of people that are down there every single day. How do we work as a federal family to continue to be able to reach out, understand the requirement, think out of the box, be innovative, and no rest until everybody in Puerto Rico gets 100% power. So with that, I'll pause and we can go into details on anything you want to.
Thank you, sir. We'll open the floor for questions.
Hi, Phil Stewart from Reuters. You said you just came out of a cabinet meeting. Could you talk about what resources you were asking for, what commitments you got? And then also, Senator Rubio yesterday was quite critical of the Corps and the lack of contracts being distributed. Could you speak a bit about where you are with contracting?
Yeah, sure. So the contracts have been awarded. We awarded the big one on Monday. I'm not sure Senator Rubio knew that at the time, and that was the one the floor contract. Again, the total on that, the cap is about 1.3, but I'm not limited to that. We can go higher if we need to, okay? And then the Power Secure one we awarded on Wednesday. So we basically have got enough capacity inbound to be able to take care of that. The cabinet meeting was really focused on me giving them an update, and it was almost the same exact update I gave you. My mission is to get the response. So how do we continue to respond in accordance with the Stafford Act to basically put back the grid as it was pre-storm? Here's the thing that's different, though. There's a lot of the grid that wasn't built to code. A lot of the grid was damaged. So you talk about this report here. Some of these lines didn't have enough poles. They had too much span between the cables. Some of the poles were cracked by other storms. Some of the channels right there. There's even some substations that we think were in flooded areas. When we go back in, we're going to do this as the Corps of Engineers would do. We're going to do it to standard. We're going to do it to code, and we're going to continue to bring it up so that it's a system that would be very, very similar to before the storm. I think the big thing that the cabinet is working on right now, and I'm not going to, I don't have a lot of insight as to where the cabinet's going to go with Congress on this, but what is the long-term plan? And that's where I talk about passion. A lot of people in that room today continue to be able to try to talk about where is America going to go and how are they going to figure out how to take care of the people of Puerto Rico. And I'm going to leave that up to the cabinet and the White House, and when they tell me what to do, then I will certainly go back in and change that specification.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, you seem to suggest in your briefing and kind of hinted at it just now that you think that even though you're working right now to restore the old system, you seem to be suggesting the old system wasn't really that good. I'm
not suggesting, I'm telling you, the old system was terrible.
So does it make sense to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars restoring a system that was terrible?
The biggest problem with the old system was generation, really. It was really the power plants. It was these things that are in purple around here that are years and years old, and they actually need an awful lot of, they have a lot of neglect, and they have a lot of backlog maintenance. The system that we're putting in is mainly transmission and distribution. All of those people living around Puerto Rico, they deserve a line down to their house. So we're putting in that system that they're going to need to have. The question really comes back to the investment that's going to meet on generation. And do you go back in? A good example. There's 7 fossil fuel, but as I talked about, 7 solar and wind and 21 hydro. So where does Puerto Rico or the federal government invest? Do you invest in more wind and solar? There's a lot of advantages to wind and solar. Do you invest in more hydro? I think that's some of the question. How do you solve a long-term deficiency in generation maintenance by figuring out how to augment that generation capability?
What does the Corps recommend?
Right now, we are not to a point to recommend. I've not been in those other power plants. All we know is that we have a gap in San Juan. So the Corps is putting 50 megawatts in right there. We're working very closely with the Department of Energy. They're the real experts when it comes to the grid, and I think they're the ones that we're going to lean on very carefully to figure out what would be the right long-term solution.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, sir. Stephanie Ramos with ABC News. So it's been a month now since Hurricane Maria made landfall on Puerto Rico. As you mentioned, about 20% of the island does have power, and that number has fluctuated. We understand there are challenges on the island to get that power restored, but how did the Corps prepare before the storm hit? Was there some sort of strategy already in place when we knew Hurricane Maria was going to hit Puerto Rico?
So of the 5 missions that I kind of laid out, our primary mission when it comes to electricity is the temporary power. So a lot of times we go in before a storm, we go to the hospitals and we write down how much does the hospital need. We'll go to the police station, we'll go to the fire station. We'll have contracts on the shelf. So this was there all before. So the contracts were already before the storm. We basically were ready to activate that contractor and fly generators in. The Corps put 127 people into Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands before the storm, rode through the Category 5 storm, rode through the storm inside a secure building. So we were able to come right back out the next day. So when it came to things like blue roofs, temporary generators, and all the rest, we had that. I think the thing that neither FEMA nor Puerto Rico nor us understood was the severity of the storm and the magnitude of the destruction when it came to the power grid. So this is where we did not have a contract on the shelf to be able to say rebuild the entire grid. And so it takes a while to do a contract, in accordance with all the rules we have. And this is where our contracting guys have been very, very fast and very streamlined. I think the other thing to point out is that wherever we've had any kind of a challenge, whether it's the FEMA leadership has given us the top cover, the White House to say continue to be able to drive on, we're going to be legal, we're going to be smart, we're going to do things right, but we're going to be very, very aggressive on how fast we can do them. Let's go back real quick. So in the United States, what happens is there are agreements between all the states. So if Florida has a significant requirement, this is a very complicated thing we can get into, but it's a different agreement between power companies and states, and those agreements and these big power authorities would very easily be driving 300 or 400 or 500 trucks down to that state before the storm or getting them all ready to go. That's the challenge, is that there were not agreements between those power authorities in Puerto Rico here. So this is where it's a little bit different dynamic than what you would see in the rest of the 48 continental states. Yes, sir.
Could you please explain some of the figures on the chart over here, like the 922 million in Puerto Rico? What does that refer to? Is that the total spent thus far? Same thing with.
So I'll just walk you down real quick. So this is again talking about the Corps of Engineers, not talking about the defense missions here. Basically, we have gotten 20. These are Puerto Rico on the left, Virgin Islands on the right. So about a total of 50 missions across the board. We have been tasked to do 922. Sir, that's not all obligated. This is what people have.
This is just the Corps.
Just the Corps. Just the Corps. Just the Corps.
Do you have a ballpark figure for how much has been spent thus far by everybody?
No, I don't. No, I know right now that we have been asked by FEMA to do somewhere in the $1.2 billion range. And again, I've got a lot of other people in the other ones, but I think today, again, somewhere around 800 or 900 that are out on the ground. This talks about the blue roofs. We think we might need up around 5,000. We're at 642 today, so that's about 14%. You'll see we're a little bit higher in Puerto Rico, but the number's a little bit lower. When it comes to temporary power, I talked about generators. We think, again, somewhere around 428. That number does change. We're doing a little bit better here in Virgin Islands on getting those generators out. The debris management, it looks like we haven't done much, but that's only because we have 6.2 million cubic yards. That's a mass. I think it's 350 Olympic-sized swimming pools that we're going to need to be able to move and to be able to get that out of people's front yards and off the roads. And then mainly, these are some of the assessments that we've done back in some of the facilities. 40% hospitals, 63% airports, 25% water. We've done some schools, and then emergency response facilities. And then this is kind of the grid, which I've already talked through. So, and this is available every day. I certainly would offer you that if you want to go online and find this. FEMA has the same kind of infographic, so you can pull FEMA's, and I know DOD does as well.
General, you said earlier you just let a contract to floor 240 million?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so that would be on top of the 922. So you're up over $1 billion.
No, that's really, well, that 240, the initial task order is 240 of that 922. It's got the capacity to go to 1.3. It's in the 922.
Okay, but you said it might go to 1.3.
It might. And this is where, again, and I'll be very, very honest with you, FEMA has not tied our hands. They said if the mission needs to be done and we need to take care of getting people back into order, then this is the money you're allowed to spend. And I have not been told no on what I feel is a valid requirement that we need to spend.
And just one other, please.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah, one other, please. And I don't know if this is in your lane, but some of the reports from the field about the hospitals, and perhaps that the field hospitals that the U.S. has put in and the Comfort are being underutilized. For instance, 250 beds on the Comfort, and there was one report last night that only 29 of the beds were occupied. Can you explain that?
Yes, sir. I can't answer that. I mean, I've got enough worried about electricity, so I mean, I'm sure DOD can give you an answer on that one, and certainly be able to refer back to them on that. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference from Vieques to the main island in terms of the restoring of electricity?
So right now, from a temporary power thing, we think we're okay. It's about the same. We've got generators are out there. We have not seen quite as much damage out there, and I think that's also fed by an underwater line. And so the main question is make sure we've got to test the validity of that line. Is that up and running? Because it's out here on On the west, the question is, I mean, on the east, this is where a lot of that damage was. So we're going to work our way out there. And it goes back to, it's just the priorities. So I can certainly follow up and find out where we're at on that. I have not been to Vieques yet to see exactly where we're at on it, but it's one of the things where it's all these priorities, and there's, as much as there's things that are important, everybody deserves the same right to power. So whoever you're living on there, you're just as high on the list, and we're going to be just as committed to get out there and taking care of you.
Give me a sense of how much personnel is out in Vieques?
I don't know that. I think I've got about a team of about 5 to 10 out there, but it's mainly doing assessments, and then they call forward our guys if they need to be able to bring them back out from Puerto Rico. When we went out the other day, it was about a 3-hour ferry to bring generators back and forth, and then if there's a requirement, I'll just keep our people out there on the island.
Am I oversimplifying then to assume that Vieques could see a slower sort of return to normalcy in terms of electricity, given the focus on the main island?
I think we have enough contractors to continue to be able to bring everybody up about the same. We don't want to focus on just one community or another. You know, how do you somehow be able to make, because I mean, it really goes back to bringing everybody back to the same place. And so we'll take a look at it. If I think that for some reason we aren't putting enough capability out there, then we'll continue to change and be flexible. And I think that's the point. We want a flexible plan. If the governor comes back in and gives us different priorities, or I get different priorities from FEMA tomorrow, we're able to adapt. I don't want to do work twice, but we've got to be able to continue to be flexible here as to how we can step up and be able to respond.
We have time for one more question.
Yes, sir.
Sir, thank you for your candor in saying how the system was terrible to begin with and that you're restoring it. You say that there's going to be a next level after that. Is the Corps going to be responsible for that, or is this private enterprise that's going to have to assume the next step, or is that a government decision?
I think it's too early to tell. The Corps mainly works its CORE functions. We don't normally come in and rebuild an entire grid. So this is something where the Department of Energy, if they have that capability to do that through a commercial capability, they certainly can. We're able to respond, though, and if needed, we'll certainly step up. It depends on what FEMA and DOD needs us to do. Right now, we are all trying to go all out to get to 100% power, and I'll be honest, we've got a lot of work to do in the next several months. What happens after that is really going to go back to what the President and Congress are going to do as the long-term rebuild.
And if I may, sorry, Steph.
Yeah.
I know it's fine. We both work at the same organization. My apologies. If I could. Going back to her earlier question about what could have been done before, as a lesson learned, is it possible that in the future you may pre-position or leave behind some of these 500 generators, large generators in place to facilitate, coming hurricane seasons in the next decade?
So, I mean, we learned an awful lot from Sandy. We learned a lot from Matthew. We continue to have teams that we built. We change our doctrine all the time. One of the things that gets to be tough, though, is having an awful lot of equipment, especially equipment that needs maintenance, sitting in great big yards. So the question is, if you don't know where the storm's going to come, I mean, this could very easily have hit anywhere else. Think about how, like Matthew, a lot of times bounced all the way up the side. So every state can't have 500 generators sitting in the yard. I think what we're able to do now is we're able to stay ahead of getting the people in first to put the generators in, and we're able to fly the generators in fast enough. So the generator, I have nobody waiting for generators. I guess that's what I'm saying. The system is agile enough to be able to get generators in fast enough. FEMA does have stockages of them, so they're able to get them in very, very quick. But I think this is one of the things we're looking at. I've got a senior leader meeting in a couple months where we're going to do a big after action review to say, what could we have learned here? Could we have done Blue Roofs faster? What else could we have done with water or something else? And I think that's what all of the federal government has to do. You can't be satisfied with where we're at. I'm not satisfied where we're at right now.
And guys, we're just about to switch shots on this source that you are watching on this Army briefing from the Chief of Engineers at the Pentagon. It's going to switch over in a second to inside the White House press briefing room, which we are, I believe, going to be taking to our Facebook page. So there we go. There's a shot inside the room. Not quite sure when that's going to start up, but I want to thank you guys for staying on the stream today and joining us, even though it was a little bit less exciting, a little slower than we wanted it to be today. But we'll have more for you on Monday at 11:30. So definitely join us here on our channel on Fox 5 Live. I'm glad you were able to stick it out this week. We had a lot of breaking news. Here, I'll take you wider inside our newsroom. We had a lot of stuff this week. So if you are new to our channel, thanks so much for coming on and subscribing to our channel. And we'll be back on Monday. So have a great weekend, guys. Use your Fridays to the full, and we'll see you then. Once again, you can join us on our Facebook page, Fox 5 DC, for more coverage and updated web stories throughout the weekend, and for the White House press briefing as well, which should be coming up in a few minutes. We'll see when that starts. All right, thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next week.